The Holy Gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ according to Luke.
Glory to you, Lord Christ.
Jesus told the disciples a parable about their need to pray always and not to lose heart. He said, in a certain city there was a judge who neither feared God nor had respect for people. In that city there was a widow who kept coming to him and saying, "Grant me justice against my opponent." For a while he refused, but later he said to himself, "Though I have no fear of God and no respect for anyone, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will grant her justice so that she may not wear me out by continually coming." And the Lord said, "Listen to what the unjust judge says. And will not God grant justice to his chosen ones who cry to him day and night? Will he delay long in helping them? I tell you, he will quickly grant justice to them. And yet, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth?" The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
Let us pray. The words of my mouth and meditations of our hearts be always acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our strength and our salvation. Amen. Please be seated. Well, as you already correctly noted, in our society, when there is something in the room that is obvious to everybody, but nobody wants to talk about it, we call that the elephant in the room. And this morning, there is, in fact, an elephant in the room. And we're going to talk about that elephant. And our hope is that in talking about an elephant, we can begin to vanquish it. We can put that elephant to flight. For now, I'm going to start with this particular elephant by just moving it back a little bit so that I have a little more room to preach. So the elephant in the room that we're going to talk about is that modern life, as good as it is, often carries with it a very dark side. We live in a world that is sometimes, often, nothing short of amazing. The opportunities, the accomplishments that are available to us really border on being miraculous. The wealth with which we live, the privileges we enjoy, I mean, it is a great time to be alive. But very often, our way of life, the advancements we've made in technology, very often it carries with it a dark side, carries with it a very high price. And so it is that study after study after study, and I've read just numbers of these over the years, and they always sort of amaze me, study after study after study finds that wealth and affluence and privilege doesn't always or even often inoculate us against worry or fear or anxiety or depression or mental illness in general. In fact, many of the components of our modern society don't inoculate us against these things. Very often they actually foster these things. They actually, the components of our modern society can actually, at least sometimes, more often than we might admit, can actually foster mental illness, depression, anxiety, fear, loneliness, isolation. And this loneliness and isolation is one of the greatest causes of physical ailments and mental ailments. And we live in a day and age unlike any other in human history where it's entirely possible for us to go through a day and encounter, even a life, and encounter only strangers. To really not need anybody else, to really not rely on anybody else, and just to isolate ourselves pretty much from anybody and everything. Just recently, Linda and I were flying up to Wisconsin for a family wedding. The plane was leaving at 6:30 in the morning, which meant we needed to leave our house at 4:30. We thought, who do we call at 4:30? And we said, well, we don't want to bother anybody. We'll just call a cab. A cab's $22 plus tip $30. That's easy. You don't have to bother anybody, and that's what we did. And then when we got back at 11:30 at night. We said, who should we call? Oh, you know what? We don't want to bother anybody. Cab's cheap, $22, $30 with a tip. That's what we did. We just took a cab. And so we didn't need to trouble anybody else. And it's this wealth, it's this willingness of strangers to do for others what family and friends would have once done that leads us to a place where we can just isolate ourselves from other people so that we don't really need other people. A person can go through a day and they don't have to go out to the store and shop. They don't even have to go grocery shopping. You just go online, do all the shopping, not come in contact with anybody else. Because we don't have to go out and shop. We don't have to drive. We don't even have to contact people out in our cars, out on the roads. And increasing numbers of young people don't even have cars, don't even want cars. We don't have to go into the office to work, many people. Many people work at home. We don't have to socialize out there in the world because we have social media right at the touch of our finger. And so it becomes entirely possible to isolate ourselves from the world around us, to live our life simply in the company of strangers and use our technology, use our wealth, use our privilege to let those strangers serve us in the way that families and friends once would have. And when people make that choice, the kind of isolation it creates actually fosters physical ailments and such things as depression, anxiety, fear, loneliness. That's in stark contrast to the society in Jesus' day, the society we hear described in this morning's gospel. And I did want to mention just one study this is the most recent one I read, and this one I found flabbergasting. This was a study of women. It was a study of the most affluent women in the world, which are, by demographics, are grouped in the urban areas of America. So be women in New York, D.C., San Francisco. And then they compared it to women in the poorest areas of the world. So it'd be urban Nigeria, out in the middle of nowhere in Haiti, areas like that. And what they found, and it's, again, it's a mind-boggling study, is what they found is that, contrary to all expectations, the most affluent women are the women who are at the greatest risk of mental illness. And so, for instance, they are fully 8 times more likely to be depressed than their counterpart in Nigeria, who you would think had all the problems in the world and nothing that's able to do with them. So sort of stunning findings and counterintuitive. That's very different than the world in which we read about in the gospel today. That gospel tells us about God, the being who rules over all, created all, has more power than anybody, more resources than anybody, and yet this God does not retire to his divine penthouse and just simply enjoy his divine pleasures all on God's own. In contrast to that, God stays in touch with his children. God stays in touch with the people that God cares for. God hears our prayers, the gospel tells us. God answers our prayers, not always in the way we like, not always in the time with the time we would like, but God hears, God cares, God answers. God doesn't allow distance to grow between ourselves and between God. Sometimes we allow distance to grow, but God does not. God always remains close to us. And the story that leads us to that truth talks about how that same closeness exists in the society of Jesus' day and how that closeness made people better people. And so it's the story of a judge who would have been the 1% in that society, who would have been the elite of that society, and the widow who would have been at the very bottom of that society. No rights, no privileges, no income, nobody to champion the widow. That would have been in the very off in the very margins of society. And the widow's got problems, no surprise there. But the thing is, the widow knows the judge, knows where the judge lives, knows where the judge eats, knows where the judge sleeps. So the widow just keeps going right up to the judge face to face, eyeball to eyeball, and saying, I got problems, do something. And the judge says, well, what's that, got to do with me? You leave me alone. I have my own penthouse and pleasures that come with being, and I just want to enjoy those. Don't bother me. But he can't isolate himself from her. He can't just withdraw to his penthouse and his pleasures and pretend like she doesn't exist. We can do that, but he couldn't do that. And so she just keeps finding him, keep coming up to him, and finally he just says, enough already, all right? Enough already. Okay, I'll do my job. I'll get the justice that you deserve. And does he help her? Not a trick question. Does he help her? Yes. Does he help himself? Yes. He does. He actually becomes a better person, doesn't he? There's an opportunity for him to help her, but there's also an opportunity. She gives him an opportunity to be a better person. He has an opportunity to help her, but he has an opportunity to become a better person himself. He does what he's supposed to do. He offers justice. He improves the state of the world. He actually helps another person. He becomes a better human being through the whole thing. That's how it's designed to work. But we, in our society, what we tend to think is that because we're largely unaware of all the needs around us, we think that we can just take all the resources that come our way, all the time that we have, all the interests that we have, and just use them on ourselves, our own little family. And that promotes a kind of life that is isolating, that is small, and that is subject to, it doesn't take us where we want to go. You know, we just get more of this, more of that, we'll be happy. No, it really doesn't work that way. What works is when we have deep connections with one another, when we're aware of the needs of the people around us, when we help people as we're able to help, and then they help us become better people. I had a profound experience of this last week that really brought me up short in my tracks. And on Wednesday, a woman named Taisha, and the only reason I tell you her name is you will likely never meet her. Taisha called the office. She called 4 different times. I was in meetings all 4 of those times and was unable to take the call. And every time she called, Miriam, our office manager, said, "Can I take your name and number, and Father Rob will call you back?" And Taisha said, "No, no, no, no," until the 5th time when finally Taisha said, "Okay, here's my name and number. Miriam sent me an email. This woman's called. She's called several times. You should call her back." And I say some people have Jiminy Cricket on his shoulder, the voice of a conscience. I have Miriam. You know, Miriam's sort of my conscience, tells me what I should and shouldn't do. And so I got the email, but then somebody else came in, and we got talking about something, and I forgot all about it, didn't call back on Wednesday. Thursday never even crossed my mind. Friday never even crossed my mind. Saturday morning, because on Wednesday, all this was a name. All right, it was just a name on a paper, no face, nothing. And it's easy to discard names, right? If it's just a name, we don't know anything about a person, it's easy to say, oh, you know, frankly, and again, this reflects poorly on me, I know, but I just figured she was probably an addict. She was probably working me for some money. She was probably making 100 of these calls. And I just, just a name. I didn't know her from any other name. I frankly wasn't going to help. But Saturday morning came, and I was reviewing my email, making sure I'd answered stuff that I needed to answer. And I found this email in there, and I thought, oh, okay, I should probably give her a call. So I called Taisha. And I get this tiny, tiny little voice, tiny, tiny little voice, and says, "May I tell her who's calling?" Just the smallest little voice. And I said, "Well, this is Rob Merola." And again, I don't give any other information because I want to see if this person really knows me. If they just have a list, they're running down the list. I have a whole series of gates to try and decide if we're going to help, what level we're going to help. And she said, "What organization, or, who are you calling from?" or something like that. "What organization are you representing?" was the gist of it. And I said, "St. Matthew's." And then, as I sort of expected, she said, "Oh, I'm Taisha." And I said, "Okay, well, Taisha, I'm Rob Merola. You called me on Wednesday at St. Matthew's Episcopal Church. Apparently, you'd like us to help us in some way. How can we help you?" And then, exactly as I expected, she said, "Well, I need money." And she said, "Our rent is $800 a month." I said, "Well, how much of that do you have?" And again, who knows if she even has rent? If she has rent, she has $800, but she can only get 100 of it, and she gets evicted anyhow. What good did it do to put some? So I'm running all this stuff through my head. She says, "Well, I managed to scrape up a little bit." Now she goes from just being a name to a person I've had a conversation with. I hear this little small voice. Now I know she really is in some kind of distress. Could be a lot of kinds of distress. So I said, "I'll tell you what," and this is another gate we generally put sort of in front of people. I said, "If you come in," because a lot of times people want us just to mail money. They don't want to meet with us, and then I know that they're just sort of working the system. So if you're in need badly enough, you'll come meet with me to get the money. So I said, "I'm going to be here because there's a yard sale going on, and just look for the guy in the black shirt and the white collar, and we can probably help you. I probably have $100 I can give you, So she said, "Okay." And so it was about an hour after that when somebody knocked on my, when somebody came up and found me and said, "Rob, this young woman's here to see you." And I said, "Oh, you must be Taisha." Well, it turns out, okay, so now we're going from just a name, being a voice, being an actual person. Turns out, Taisha is an 18-year-old girl. She has 3 siblings from ages, her youngest sister is 4, her youngest brother is 8. So 4 to 8. And father is nowhere on the scene. No dad, hasn't know her dad, hasn't seen her dad, no idea there. And I said, "Well, what about mom?" She says, "Mom's really sick." And I said, "Well, how sick is she? Can she help? Can't she do something?" She says, "No, my mom's really sick." Now, who knows what that means? It could be mom's the addict, could mean a whole bunch of things, but whatever it is, mom's clearly not doing a blessed thing. And she says, "So I'm the one that's got to keep the family together." said, I found this guy, his name's Ken. He's got a basement, and he rents us this basement for $800 a month. You know, one room, this family down this basement, $800 a month. And she says, but you know, I've been trying to get a better job because my brothers and sisters, they eat a lot. And by the time I give them food, I don't always have enough money for rent. And so I got a better job. The better job, by the way, is hostessing at a local restaurant. Right, that's the better job. She says, in the gap between the two, I didn't have the income that I did, and so I don't have the money that I need, and that's why he's going to evict me. And she said, and then again, this small voice, and she just sort of looks down, just in utter shame, and she says, and I can't let everybody down. And I thought, oh my goodness, you know, oh my goodness. And you know, I was going to give her 100, maybe 150. I just heard that voice, you know, right then and there. I said, no, you give her every penny she needs. You don't let anything in, you know, just, so pulled out the checkbook, you know, $600 just, and I never do that. I mean, because we don't have that kind of money to give out that level of money, but I just knew it was the right thing. And she said, while I was writing out, she still thought I was writing out for 100, 150. She said, I don't know where I'm going to get the money, and if I can't get it, somebody else is going to get my brothers and sisters. And I just feel like they're better off with me. And I said, well, Taisha, today you don't have to worry about the rent. And so I just pulled out that $600 check and handed it over. And her eyes looked at that. And a lot of times when we do things like that, people just start to cry. All of a sudden, she just gets the biggest smile on her face. Her eyeballs just pop. And she says, thank you. I had no idea. And she's just grinning ear to ear. She's got this big, her eyes are like bug eyes. And she said, oh, thank you. I can't thank you enough. I said, Taisha, are you a hugger? And she says, I'm a hugger now. And she just throws her arms around me. And I put my arms around her and said, Taisha, may I pray with you? And she said, oh, yes. And I just, you know, put my hand on her head, and we said a prayer together. And she just floated out of the office. I'll tell you, friends, you see, did I help her? Yes, I did. You better believe we helped her. Did she help me? Oh, yes, she did. You better. That was the best moment of my day, the very best moment of this last week. Heck, it's one of the top moments of my life. You see, that's what life is meant to be. Not just isolated people enjoying their wealth, affluence, prestige, privileges, totally isolated from the needs around them, and all the while just unhappy, struggling, suffering with this, dealing with that. But finding the people around them and helping those people and remembering what life is all about, becoming better people ourselves, and finding the joy that is in that. Now, I need to tell you one more story, lest you think it's only helping people that are out there. Because I'll guarantee you it's not people that are just out there. I'll guarantee you there are people right here who need our help. And I'm not just talking financial help. Sometimes it's that. You'll hear another story. Keith's going to tell you a story about help that's not financial at all that people have given him. Sometimes it's listening. Sometimes it's just being there for somebody. But I'll guarantee you that's the case here. And I'll also tell you that Jesus designed for the church. Jesus never imagined a church where a person with the means to help somebody would sit right next to somebody who needs help, and because the two of them don't know each other, they go forth from out without ever having their lives intersect. That was never his intention for this. His intention was that we would actually know the people around us, so we know the needs of the people around us, so we'd help the people around us, and in helping other people around us, we'd help ourselves because we'll become better people. So you know my older daughter. My older daughter's name is Christine. Christine is in their fourth of a 5-year PhD program in psychology in Southern California. It's a very expensive program. She's got about half of it paid in scholarship, a little bit more than that, but that still leaves a huge chunk. She works 3 jobs to pay that, and she does. We pay her rent, which is also very expensive and which stretches us, quite frankly. She goes to a very wealthy Episcopal church. It's called All Saints of Pasadena. Some of you may know it. Big, very, very wealthy Episcopal church. We've raised Christine to be self-sufficient. I think that's an important thing that a parent teaches a child, is how to be self-sufficient. Christine wants to be self-sufficient. She doesn't like to ask for help. But on rare occasions, she will call us. And I mean, this happened just a few weeks ago. She called up, and in one, again, those tiny little small voices, and for her, it's really filled with shame because she feels like she's not being self-sufficient. She says, and you talk about what breaks a parent's heart, she says, Dad, I don't have money for food. I haven't had any food in the house for a week. I mean, can you spare even a little bit? I mean, please. She hates to ask. She goes dumpster diving. I know she dumpster dives. She knows all local dumpsters. She goes. I did the same thing when I was in graduate school. I think that builds character. But sometimes, despite all that, she just comes up short. And so here's a bright, outstanding young woman who comes from a family of means in a church surrounded by people of means, and nobody knows that she's going hungry. And if one of those affluent businessmen, businesswomen, one of those people just got to know her for a moment, and if they've had kids like that and said, you know what, hey, let's go out for lunch after this, she would love that. And you go out for lunch and she'd probably eat a quarter of her meal and take all the rest of it home, and she'd eat for a week. But people don't know each other, so they don't help her. And I'll guarantee you that in one way or another, and I'll guarantee you because I know this is true, because I know a lot of your stories, that's the case here. So dear friends, let's call the elephant what it is. Modern life, as good as it is, isn't always cracked up to be. And often it works against us and exacts a terrible price from our soul. Let's not allow ourselves to be isolated from one another. Let's not allow ourselves just to use all or even the vast majority of our resources just on ourselves. Let's get to know the people around us. Let's care for the people around us. Let's be generous with everything that we have, particularly our money. And let's send the elephant packing. Amen? Amen. And as a first step, so we can take communion, we're going to do just that. We'll say the prayers, let it deflate, and then at the peace, we'll move it out of the way.